You're listening to the Mind Your Business podcast, episode number 8. Today, we're going to talk all about that dreaded habit that we all have of comparing ourselves to others, why we do it, and how we can fix it. Hi, I'm James Wedmore, and I've built a 7-figure internet business that offers the financial freedom to do what I want, when I want. And I'm the first to say that hard work and hustle are not essential ingredients for your success. So, how do you build a thriving business from the inside out? This is the Mind Your Business podcast, featuring myself and co-host Phoebe Mroczek. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. I'm James Wedmore.
I'm Phoebe Mroczek.
And in today's episode, we're going to talk about how to compare yourself to others.
Ooh, that's a new one.
That's a new one. That's unique. Yes. How to do it the right way. Now, before we get into it, Phoebe, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here.
How are you feeling about the podcast so far?
I feel like we're getting better and better each episode. So I think at the beginning, it was a little kind of trying to figure it out.
You were awful.
I know. No qualms about that. But
you feel like you're getting your... like a groove,
getting in the groove.
Getting in the flow of it.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny that you can't really get into that groove or flow until you just get started?
Yeah, definitely.
So should we just delete all those old episodes?
Yeah, let's just go for it. This can be number 1.
This is the first one ever right here. How do you feel though that we haven't put one out there yet, right? But how do you feel like do you think people are going to like this, or do you think they're going to think it's all garbage?
I mean, for me, this is definitely something I would love to listen to. So even if it's just me and you listening to this podcast over and over, that I'd be all right with that.
Yeah. Who doesn't love listening to themselves, right?
Exactly.
So
you, my mom, Chelsea.
that's about it. That's our audience. So let's get into it today. Today's a very special or unique topic because it's called How to Compare Yourself to Others. And we wanted to do this title because everybody says, don't compare yourself to others.
Right. That's
like saying, don't think of a purple elephant.
Exactly. It's like the white polar bear or something. I think there was an experiment where don't think about the white polar bear, and that's all you can think about.
That's all you can think about. Or it's like you're, driving on the freeway and there's an accident. It's like, don't look at the accident. Right. Yeah, well, that's why, traffic's so bad.
Well, there is a theory in motorbiking called object fixation. And so what you think about, if there's a rock in the road, if you're looking at it, you're going to hit it. And so I always think of it like this, like if you are saying, oh, don't think about it, but you're staring right at it, of course you're going to hit it. So that is, comparing yourself to others, I think this is a really good topic, especially for myself, because I know we're going to talk about this, how it's unavoidable, but for me, this is something I have always struggled with, and I guess we'll get into it a little bit more.
Yeah, because, we could not create an episode that would be effective on how to not compare yourself to others. It's impossible. How do you do that?
Exactly.
So rather, we'll show you how to do it more effectively so you can be left feeling more empowered and positive. And it really, once we understand that it's unavoidable, we're just going to give you, and you're going to do it, we're just going to give you 4 steps on how to do it more powerfully. But we have a few quotes that we want to share with you.
So the first one is from Theodore Roosevelt, and he said, comparison is the thief of joy.
Ouch.
So, I know. I thought that was a good one. I like that one.
I like joy. And here's another one. I came up with this. How about that? James creating his own quotes here. That says, contrast is the seed of desire. So you have to understand that comparison, when you take, and we're going to dive into this in a moment, but when you look at someone or something and you compare it and, see what is the similarities and differences, those differences are the contrast. And if you really start to get that the contrast is the seed of desire, then the next step is desire is the foundation for results. So the example when we were talking before the show was, if you take a shower and it's too cold and you'd like it to be warmer, that contrast of it being unwanted, of being something that it isn't what you want to experience, creates a desire for you to have a warmer shower. So what do you do from that desire? You then take action to get the result of a warmer shower. Now, I tried to create as crude and simplistic of an example as possible, but you'll see how this really comes into play as we move forward. So contrast is the seed of desire, and desire is the foundation for creating results in your life.
That's a tweetable. I feel like that's a good one. I like that.
It.
I said to him earlier before the show, oh, who came up with that one? That was a James Wedmore original.
I think so. Or maybe it's like, somehow floated into my subconscious mind from something I've read, and now I'm like, don't remember it. So I'm just stating it and saying, that sounds cool.
Take credit for it.
But I won't take credit for it until someone like Googles it, and like, let's hope no one else came up with it. So how is it, so hard to find like what's ever original. But anyways, we're getting sidetracked. So let's take a look at these 4 steps to compare yourself to others, or 4 steps that you can take once you've compared yourself to others, so that you can be left feeling more empowered and unstoppable. So what are our 4 steps?
So the first step is acknowledge it. So we've talked about already that it's inevitable. You're going to compare yourself to others. So the first step is just to go ahead and acknowledge it.
Yeah, I think there's something really powerful when you can start to be the observer, looking at yourself, going, oh, there I go again, comparing myself to somebody else. Oh, look, I'm doing it right now. Like, you create some separation and some space from yourself. And I think it, first and foremost, the acknowledgement of it, they say like what you resist persists. And by identifying it and acknowledging that, step 1, it doesn't really persist anymore. I also want to say something here why this is so important to acknowledge it, is that I think the first distinction we want to make is that there really isn't anything inherently bad when you do compare yourself to others, that there's nothing really wrong with it. We just end up doing it and feel crappy about ourselves. But I promise you, if you look, there has been a time in your life where you did compare yourself to someone else, and you probably felt pretty good, right? Like, you're
We've all done it.
Yeah, like, well, at least I'm not, got it as bad as he does, or something like that. So what I want you guys to get is the action of comparing yourself to others in and of itself isn't anything at all. It isn't good or bad. What we want to do is realize that we put a meaning on it the moment we focus on that person that has all that we want, or is 10 steps ahead of us, or has all that success and, the things that we don't have or can't have or whatever. Maybe they're younger, maybe they got more money, they got a better business, they got better this or that or whatever. And that it's the meaning that we put on that comparison. And there's really like just 2 meanings, right? One meaning is one that leaves you feel powerless, like something's wrong with me.
Right.
Or I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy enough, or I can't do this. Something like that, disempowering. And then there's the empowering meaning, which is the one that leaves you going, oh, this is possible for me. Oh, I could do this. And when you've put on, that meaning happens instantly. Like, you don't even hear yourself say that. So what meaning has been created simply by the emotion you feel in the moment. So if I look at somebody else that maybe has something I want, bigger business, more money, something, whatever, it could be superficial. It could be something, there's nothing wrong with it if it's like material, tangible things. And if I go into a negative place about it, somewhere in that comparison, I made it mean that I can't access that I can't have that, or that there's something wrong that will not allow me to have it. And we want to first allow you to, or encourage you to sit there and say, well, wait a second, that's not necessarily true at all. And we'll get through this in the process. But there are other times, like, what is really stopping us from looking at somebody else that has something? Like, let's, for example, we're starting a podcast. We look at somebody that's just got like 200 episodes. Do we sit there and say, gosh, we only have like 8? Or do we sit there and go, oh, that's our next big goal. That's what's possible for us. And
they did it. Why can't we?
Why can't we?
Now, it is possible.
Thank you for showing me what is possible and what's realistic. So I think that's really the first step, is to simply acknowledge it. And the more you can walk around and just say, oh, I did it again. And like, oh, I compared myself again. And become aware, become present to whether it is an empowering comparison or a disempowering comparison. And the only way you know that is, how do I feel in this moment?
Right.
Every time you feel negative, it is because you are experiencing something unwanted in your life. So if I compare myself to someone with 200 podcast episodes and I get down on it, it's because the unwanted is evidence that I can't do that myself, or that I'm not capable enough or successful enough, or whatever stupid meaning that I've put on it, that we all put on it. It's ridiculous, but we do it.
Well, and I think until you're able to acknowledge it and pull away, as we're talking about, you're not able to actually change any of your thoughts. And so when we start talking about the emotion that you've attached to it, one thing that I kind of wanted to bring up is just to remind yourself, I know we get so caught up in what everybody else has and what they're doing. And it's very easy to see all these other people and think to yourself, oh, why am I not doing that? And why is this not happening for me? Or, as you said earlier, like bigger, faster, stronger, whatever. But just take a step back and remind yourself, why are you doing this? Or what is your goal? And hopefully that will help you kind of put some perspective on the situation.
Yeah. So as weird as this first step sounds, like we want you to identify it. We want you to put like a label on it.
Right.
Like, comparison number 365 of the day. Mm-hmm. Instead of trying to get you to say, don't do it. Don't think of that brown cow, is to actually observe it. And then, I don't know how deep you guys want to get down the rabbit hole, but like, then who's doing the observing? Mm-hmm. If there's someone doing the comparison and then there's someone observing the person who's doing the comparison, like who is who and which are you? And that just is a conversation for another time. So let's just leave it at that. Step one is to identify and acknowledge the comparison. And if you can also go deeper and identify if it is a positive, empowering, and good feeling comparison or negative. Because there are definitely times that you can feel good like comparing yourself to somebody else. You're like, wow, at least I don't have it as bad as they do. And then, a feeling of gratitude comes.
Right.
And that's a positive feeling. Okay, let's look at step number 2.
So step number 2 is to determine the context and perspective. So I know we're going to kind of break this down into 3 main sections of time, goals, and personality types.
Yes. So the thing is like we make so much stuff up in our head. And that's really why step 1 is to start there, because just because it's a comparison and we're comparing something, like we're observing something that we make a story about it. We don't necessarily think that's not necessarily the truth. We observe it as the truth and this is the way it is. It's like, no, he's more successful or she's because of this, because she's younger or prettier or whatever. And that is like, you just have no idea. You have no idea. So what we did is we've created 3 different categories that will allow you to have a little bit more a unique perspective and a little bit more context when you do decide to compare yourself to others. And one of the greatest pieces of advice I got from a mentor of mine was to never, ever compare your back end or behind the scenes to someone's in front of the scenes, or I don't know what the right terminology is, but like their on-stage performance to your behind the scenes. It's always more of a mess behind the scenes than anyone will ever let on.
Well, that's the whole thing with social media is you always put your best foot forward. And so when you look at somebody on stage and they look very presentable and all, but you don't know what's happened behind the scenes to get them to where they are. And that can be messy. But I think, personally, that's what we do.
But we just look at that and we assume like, well, they've got their together.
Exactly.
So,
you look at their Instagram feed. Oh, wow. Look how great her life is. Mm-hmm. Or, oh my gosh, she's amazing.
You have no idea.
Exactly.
You have no idea. And even sometimes we try to be like sleuths and stalkers and try and figure out like we think we have a clue. We have no idea. No idea whatsoever. The other thing is, and I think Phoebe brought this up, is that we kind of want to acknowledge too, before we get into these 3 big distinctions, that we are pretty hard on ourselves.
Always.
As it is. So like, give yourself a break.
Yeah.
Maybe a little.
Yeah. You never see all the great things that you're accomplishing, or rarely do you acknowledge those. So,
because you're already on to the next thing anyway.
Exactly.
You're like, well, I did that. Let's see what I can do next.
Yep.
But we want to look at these 3 things. So time, goals, and personality type. So the first one is time. Okay. So when we're trying to create context for the comparison, this is something I started doing a long time ago, is when I was just getting started or I was just like a fledgling entrepreneur, is I'd look at somebody who had made it and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I could never do what they do. Like, look at it. They got a team. They've got a budget. They've got a following. And I'd just compare myself to them and it would be an immediate breakdown. Like, just like, I can't, I give up. And then I don't know where this came from, but I said, well, wait a second. So I've been in business, let's say 2 years, and they've been in business 10 years. And so the thing I want to ask you is, if this happens to you, let's say you're in year 2 and someone's in year 10 and you're comparing yourself to them, why the heck are you comparing yourself to somebody who has 8 years of experience on you? Do you realize how, if someone just instantly downloaded like Neo in the Matrix, 8 years of experience in me, I would just be like a million times more effective, powerful, smarter, wiser, and all that type of stuff. Like, 8 years, that's a lot. And you're comparing your 1 year, your 2 year to someone with 10 years. It's freaking ridiculous. So what you want to do instead is say, kind of like, you may not ever be able to actually figure it out, but look at that person and say, well, where were they at 2 years? If you're going to compare yourself to somebody, at least compare them on the right timeline. Because if you were to actually do that, like if you could get in DeLorean and figure that out, you'd probably discover that you're already way further along than they were, especially if we're comparing ourselves to like another online internet person, because dang, it was like the wild, wild west back then. Like the technology that exists today makes it so much easier. And this is so funny. We're going to get into so many tangents and rants. And by the way, if we haven't said this, like we should probably go back and edit this and add this, is Phoebe and I have both acknowledged that we compare ourselves to others all the time.
Right.
So this is not coming from a place of like, when you reach enlightenment like us and you learn how to never compare yourself to your fellow man. No, this is like, okay, we do that. This is like an epidemic.
This is like a learning process. Even like going over this for me, I'm like, oh, right. Yeah,
of course. Doing that.
Right.
So like today, I mean, I'm going to sound like my dad or something, but it's like kids don't know how easy they've got it today. These young whippersnappers on the internet, like you can, like with something like Lead Pages, like I always talk about my favorite software, Lead Pages. So you can make a freaking web page in 30 seconds that can like build your list and sell your stuff. And people are like, I don't know, Lead Pages is kind of expensive. I'm like, okay, why don't you read a 950 page book on Dreamweaver, learn how to build websites, and tell me when you get one done.
And in 5 years, come back to me when it's all changed.
Me when it's done, and we can talk. I mean, but that's what we're dealing with people that, people that have been around for 10 to 15 years. That's the type of stuff they were doing back then. And I just guarantee you, if you're someone who's in like the 1 to 3 year mark and you're having a breakdown every time you see someone who's like, oh, but they're just like the guru, the authority, and blah, blah, blah. I was like, listen, when they were in year 1, 2, or 3, I guarantee you they were a million steps behind you.
Yeah, going through the same stuff, having the same feelings. Yeah. I know for me, mine was always Marie Forleo. I would always compare myself. Oh gosh, she's got it made. She's got everything, everything that I've ever wanted. And then I'm like, wait a second. She's successful right now. But, when I looked at her business and just kind of took myself back, I was like, you know what? She probably was a mess sometimes too.
And first, so there's so many things that come back up. We've just said is like, well, okay, so you're comparing your back end behind the scenes to what you see on social media, which is it's very intentional. Like we're only supposed to show the good stuff. It's marketing. I mean, it's branding. Come on, people. But then also, that she's been in business for a very long time.
Right.
Like at least 10 or 12 years or something like that. Right. And you don't know what it was like when she got started. We have no idea what she was dealing with, struggling with, etc.
Well, and I think she also, on her website, I remember her showing where her business was or her first website or something. And I was reading the post being like, yes.
Right. Like, oh, good. I've never had one that bad before. Right? Yes. So look at what we're doing here with step 2 is we're getting you to look at it through a different perspective by giving you some context. The first one is saying, if you're going to compare yourself to someone else, someone that's further ahead of you, put yourself on the same timeline as them. If they've been in business for 10 years and you've been in business for 1, go back in time to where they were after 12 months, after a year of doing business. And now you can have a real comparison, okay? And chances are you're way further ahead than they were. They did not have the tools and the opportunities, let alone the amount of people on the internet as you did. I mean, there were so many fewer people on the internet 10 years ago, let alone people that were willing to buy stuff online. So you're probably already ahead just when you look at it from a time standpoint. But let's look at it from goals. This is the second distinction or perspective we want to make. And this one was important for me that we included because every time I have a breakdown comparing myself to someone else, I always want to remind myself of what are my goals.
Right.
Like if I look at someone with like 4-time New York Times bestselling author, I can very quickly go, oh, I don't have that. Mm-hmm. But then I go, well, wait a second. I don't want that. At least right now in my life, I don't want to do the whole book game. I don't want to sit down, write a book, try and get it published, then do a book tour, then do all this type of stuff just so I can have, all the stuff that comes with saying you're a New York Times bestselling author. That's just not what I want to do right now. So it's not in alignment with my goals. So a lot of times you compare yourself to somebody else that's just on a different path than you. They're going in a different direction, but they have something that maybe you want or a component or a piece of what you want. Like they've got that audience or the following or
the lifestyle.
And it's like, so you got to check in and say, what are your goals they may not be anything similar to this person that you're comparing yourself to. Like if your goals and like rules too, not just goals, but rules, like what are the rules for yourself? Like mine is I try and go surfing every day, and it's become so much more about a lifestyle, my health and my time and my freedom than anything else. So if someone wants to make more money than me, if someone is making more money than me, but they're working twice as hard, that's not even a comparison. I'm just like, cool, that's not what I want. So it's not a breakdown where it used to really be a breakdown for me.
Right. And I know that we talked a lot in the first few episodes just about like, the hustle and working harder. And it's not about that. It's just, for you, James, when you're saying, that's not your priority, is to like work longer, harder, all of that. It's more about, your lifestyle. And I think this is something I have to go back to because my lifestyle is very much, is very nomadic, and I like to travel a lot. Yep. And so when I see people with these huge houses and they're buying these yachts and all this stuff, and I'm like, oh, why don't I have that? And then I have to kind of reflect back on my situation. I'm like, but that's not what I want.
Because you didn't choose that.
Exactly.
And we have to remind ourselves, there's always, and Phoebe already said this, but there's always going to be the bigger, badder, faster, stronger type people out there. So it's a dangerous rat race anyways. And let's look at the third distinction or piece of context we want to get. And this is a whole episode. We're going to get into this stuff down the road. There's so many things we want to talk about on this podcast. But one of which is something that's been a passion of mine for years, which is personality types. And I use the framework of Myers-Briggs, which was originally developed by Carl Jung, I don't know, like in the 50s or 60s, and I just love it. I use it on myself, INTJ, hashtag INTJ. I use it, I don't think it's actually legal, but I use it with my employees. Right. I use it for my customer avatar in my marketing. I use it on my family. I use it with my fiance in our communication. It basically stems from that there are 16 basic personality types based on these 4 different types of temperaments, just like if you're right-handed, you can still use your left hand, but you tend to use your right hand. So if I'm sitting next to you at dinner, I want to be on your left side so I don't bump elbows with you. Like those, when I know those temperaments, I can actually use them to my advantage, right? So personality types, this is where like introversion and extroversion comes in. So, we'll put a link in the show notes so you can actually identify what your personality type is. But here's the thing. I mean, I could go so far with this, but when you identify what your personality type is, you identify your strengths. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so important to identify our strengths. There's nothing wrong with I've heard both sides of it. It's like, don't focus on your weaknesses, only your strengths. And then I've heard other people say like, build up your weaknesses. It's like, do whatever the heck you want, but at least know what your strengths are and know what your weaknesses are as well. And you then do what you want with that. But when I discovered what my strengths were, I started seeing people online that I would compare myself to. And it was no longer a breakdown for me because I realized we had opposing strengths and weaknesses. That they were the extroverted, hug the world, super emotional, touchy-feely, very loud, had to be the center of attention type people. And I said, okay, I can compare myself to these people all day and I'll never be able to be like them because they're utilizing their strengths, and their strengths happen to be my weaknesses. Now, me being an introvert, my strengths are in a lot of stuff like getting very detailed, very good with systems, and a lot of thinking, and a lot of intuition, and observing and listening, not necessarily being the loudest person in the room, right? And so I found people that had those same personality types because I got so good at the personality types things, I could speed read people. I could just see by how they talked and their mannerisms, what type they were. And so there's a lot of INTJs in business that I see. I'm like, oh, there's another INTJ, same personality type as me. How are they using their strengths? And they were using them in the same way that I have the same strengths. I'd much rather go in alignment with that versus like trying to look at someone who's like the most popular kid in school. So the example we gave is Gary Vaynerchuk, who's somebody who is very extroverted, very outgoing, very much out there to like, has a purpose, not that no one has a purpose, but like has this like life-changing, change the world with social media, future type message to share with all these people. I said this before the show to Phoebe, is he has the same personality type as Oprah Winfrey. And you can actually start to see a lot of similarities. Now, One's a female, one's a guy, and they're in completely different industries, and they both have their own way of doing it, but it's a very similar theme. And then you take someone who's like Tim Ferriss, he's an introvert. And he's going to be the left brain, methodical thinker. That's why he comes out with books like the 4-hour work week, right? Because it's like, how do I become more effective and efficient and build systems and work as little as possible and have the biggest impact? Versus how do I get on stage and be as loud as possible and reach as many people and change the world and talk to all of them? It's a very different approach. And then when you put those up against each other, you just really see the contrast. So I wanted to use people that, like, most of our listeners are going to easily recognize them. And they are just opposing personality types. So if I'm comparing myself to the Gary Vee type who's completely opposite of me, I'm always going to be in a breakdown because I just don't have those strengths as much as I try. Those are my weaknesses.
Right. And I think coming back to, like, being confident in what you have and appreciating your strengths, I think will make that so much easier for you because, when you obviously try to be somebody that you're not, it's never going to come out in an authentic way. And so I very much resonate with what you were saying because I know that there are a few times I'm like, oh, he or she is like getting all these people on social media, is all over Periscope and, all these things. And why am I not more like that? But that's just not the way I am. And
that's okay.
Right.
And then you find people who are others that are more like me that I can not compare myself to and be in a breakdown about, but be inspired by.
Right.
Who have done it despite those things. Like, they're not the biggest, loudest person in the room. They're not the fastest talker or the funniest person, but they're still successful in their own way.
And then I like to look at it, we had talked about earlier, was just, the methods, not the milestones. And like, what are they doing? How can I kind of use their methods to get to where I want to go? And so just kind of helping yourself, looking at what they're doing to get to where you want to go in, using all of these things that we're talking about. So I think personality types is something that I have never really considered. I would say probably until about a year ago. And,
my bad.
Your fault. But no, I think it is something really important that people don't talk about. And, not everybody's going to, just because you are successful online or you're successful on stage, whatever it is that you choose to do, you don't have to be a certain way. So that's something for me personally that I have had to kind of deal with.
So we talked a lot about the second step, but I think this is the most important step, which is to really, if you're going to be in a breakdown, if you're going to be upset about your comparison of somebody else out there, let's try and create some context and some perspective. Let's look at it from a time or a timeline duration of how long they've been in the game. I mean, every year you're in business, oh my gosh, you got to get how much wisdom and experience and just your self-worth and value. I mean, if you were your own asset, you would just be appreciating so much from that time. And then identifying goals. Like, do you have the same goals as this other person? Do you have rules for how you want to live your life and what is that you're actually creating versus what they're doing? And it could be something totally different. And then, of course, the third one is what you're doing in alignment with your strengths. And is it the same as this person that you're comparing yourself to? Or are they like, their strengths are your weaknesses? And that's where your personality comes in. And that's the Myers-Briggs personality type. So really important step. But let's go ahead and talk about step number 3.
So step number 3 is to identify new goals. And so I know that we're talking about, when you see somebody else has something that maybe you want or, that you don't have, maybe you can add some of their goals to your list.
Yeah. So if you remember the quote that I made at the beginning of the call, it was, contrast is the seed of desire. So whether when you compare yourself to somebody, it's because they've got something that you don't currently have, and you're either empowered by that because it's inspiring that you can get that, or you're upset that you don't have it. But either way, you want it. Because if I told you, there's this guy here's this other guy over here, and he's working 20 hours a day, and he's not making any money, and he's got a podcast, and he has 3 viewers. Like, there's no breakdown there.
Right.
Like, if I share that with you, you're not sitting there going, oh, I want that, right? or you're not feeling like, oh, gosh, why can't I be more like this, right? But if I sit there and talk about this person who's like, here's a guy who works 2 hours a week, and he's making $1 million a month, and all he's doing is jumping jacks in his living room and filming it. All of a sudden you're like, what am I doing wrong?
Exactly.
Right? Like, isn't that fascinating how that happens? It's going to feel bad because there's a part of you that wants it, or all of you that wants it, or wants something about that. So this third step is to be able to just say, okay, I've experienced a negative emotion, and a negative emotion simply means I'm experiencing the absence of what I want. So what do I want? If you could literally just take step 3 and say, what do I want from this? What is it that I want? And put it on as part of your goal list. Great. Now it just becomes something that you work towards. Put it on your vision board. You put it on your to-do list. You do something. What do you want? Obviously, if you've compared yourself to someone and it's negative, there's something there that you want. And that's it. That's step 3. So what do you want?
So the next one, I feel like this feeds really nicely into step 4, which is gratitude.
Yes.
So I feel like this comes up in a lot of our first 8 podcasts, but then it will come up several more times.
It should come up every episode.
Exactly.
Like we should just be in gratitude the entire time you're listening to this, because we've said this before, that gratitude is the emotion or the vibration that is the most attractive. Like it's what brings in the ish that you want the most. So if step 3 is about identifying, oh yeah, I did compare myself to this other person because, I kind of like what they got over here. Well, you can't receive what you want from step 3 until you're grateful, right? That's like opening your arms for more. Like if you have a closed fist, you can't receive, but to open your hands to receive comes from gratitude. That's why everyone's always like, be grateful. Mm-hmm. Like, not that we're like, you got to have the attachment to like, only be grateful so you can get more stuff, but it feels good to be grateful anyway. So there's 2 things we want you to be grateful for. The first thing, and this is so important, is, remember, you just went through this yucky experience of being like, oh, why am I not here yet? I mean, seriously, like, listen, guys, I'm just going to get real and authentic. Like when I saw people on Periscope and I wasn't on Periscope, I started comparing myself to all these people that already had like 3,000 followers, 10,000 followers. And I'm like, gosh, who am I to even try getting on Periscope? I compared myself to all of these people and I forgot all the stuff that I've done for 7 years.
Right.
Like it's freaking crazy. And so step 4 is make a list of all your things that you're proud of, that you're grateful for, the things that you've accomplished, the things that you have, the things that you've done that just make you feel good, because you're using your logical brain to sit there and say, well, I have this and I have that. And this is a fact. Like I could say like, well, I've done 3 creative live shows and I built a YouTube channel with all these millions of views and I got this big email list and I've had these giant, it's easier for me now than obviously if I was like year 1. So I was able to get out of it really fast. But, another way is just be like, let's say you're just started your business or something and be like, well, a lot of people I know always say they want to start a business and they never do. And they're stuck in their job. And at least I got out of my job. And at least I'm doing this. And at least I'm, starting something. At least I'm going after my dreams instead of just putting them on the shelf. Like it doesn't matter where you're at. You can find something to be grateful for.
Well, that's it. And I would just say start where you are, and when we're going back to somebody who just started their business, at the very beginning, I started with a travel blog. And I remember going through and almost throwing my computer out the window because WordPress was just so baffling. Wow. And I was just like going through all these tutorials and all this. And now if I'm going through my accomplishment inventory, at least I know how to, obviously I can do more than that now, but just where I was, there was such a steep learning curve. And that was a week, of pulling my hair out. But then after a week, I was like, right, I get it. I got it, and then starting to kind of progress from there, I had so many more things to kind of tack on that I could be grateful for. And so I would just encourage you to, I call it my accomplishment inventory, just to sit down and write out 50 things that you are incredibly grateful for. And that, I just think 50 is a really good number, because once you start to get to like 35, that's where personally, it's a stretch. Mm-hmm. So I would just say to, just make sure that you are staying grateful, because that's the first step in all of this process.
And then there's one other thing to be grateful. This is like number 51 on your list. And this can be the hardest thing to be grateful for. But you want to take a moment, show gratitude, and give a little blessing to this person that you've just compared yourself to. Because it's only through your comparison to them that a desire was born within you to stretch yourself to that next thing that's coming your way. And they might have come into your life just for that reason alone, to create a new want or desire in your life, to show you that something is possible. And when you can sit there and be complete with that, and complete with that person, and not be sitting there secretly hating them, because what is the opposite of gratitude. It's negative emotions like resentment. So if we resent the very person that embodies what we want, all we do is push away all those things we put on our vision boards and those desire lists and stuff. So we have to be able to honor and love and thank this person that has come into our life to show us, hey, here's what else is possible. Or look at this. This is what this looks like on somebody else. Do you want it on you? This can be hard at first until you realize, like, this is what this abundance mindset is that because Phoebe has $1 million, it doesn't mean that there's $1 million less in the world. But that's how people really think. It's like, because Phoebe has a #1 podcast doesn't mean that there's only 2 through 99 available. It doesn't mean, because Phoebe has a list of 100,000 people, doesn't mean that there's 100 less thousand people that could be on your email list. But that's how we think.
Definitely. And in your example with the guy with the jumping jacks who works 2 hours a week.
He's awesome, by the way. I am a little jealous.
But looking at that, just saying like, wow, that, I didn't even know that was possible. I have a feeling that's a made up example. Is it not?
Oh, no, he's real. And I am totally peanut butter and jelly. No, he's fake.
Okay. I was like, wow, I'm in the wrong market. But having somebody present to like stretch you to actually understand, as we said, understand what's possible. And also, I read something recently that was saying when somebody shows up for you doing something or having something that you want, that's just the universe showing you that it's on its way to you.
Yes.
And so I love that. And so that's what I personally use when I do.
So can you give me a specific example of that? Because I think that's so important. And I think it's a very common thing that I point out to people all the time. So do you have like a specific example of that?
Yeah. So I would say when I see somebody that's kind of gone really fast, or maybe they have I'll use this, has like a really successful course, and somebody, it's just like really happened, obviously comparing my back end to their front end, but it just looked effortless. And so I'll see this kind of.
And that's been a desire of yours,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? And so I've seen it with others.
Yeah. And the more that I'm kind of in the online marketing space and in my circles, I'm seeing all these people just creating these amazing courses that are going so well, and their people love them. And, it's just a really kind of successful time for them. And I just have to reflect back on myself and just remind myself that, first of all, this is possible. And second of all, it's on its way to me.
And the universe is just showing you proof of it everywhere, which helps give you more confidence. However, again, we make the choice of what it means.
Right.
So Phoebe in every moment gets to decide, oh, everyone else can do it but me,
right,
which doesn't feel very good. Or, yes, this is possible. Look at all the evidence around me. So I'm going to instill this, everybody, with a very visual metaphor and a story I learned from a book I read a while back. It talks about when Christopher Columbus, I don't know if this is true or not, but let's pretend that it is. When Christopher Columbus was discovering America, they saw driftwood floating in the water. And when they saw the driftwood, they said, hey, we're going towards land. This is proof that land is close. And that kept them going. That got them re-inspired and more motivated and happy that they're on the right path. And a lot of the times, that's what this stuff is it's driftwood. It's proof that you're on the right track and you're going in the right direction. You just haven't seen the land yet, but you're seeing evidence of it through other people's examples or, stories that you've heard or whatever, and it's showing up. It's just not there yet, but we're already like, oh, I don't see land in front of me. I'm turning around. And you go all the way back to India.
Right.
Or Spain. Where
Spain. The other thing is that Christopher Columbus, in this example, he had a choice of what that...
Let's just call him Chris.
Chris.
The first name.
Pretty much. We're pretty much best friends. But, he had a choice. What was that driftwood going to mean? Was that like, oh, look at all the other ships that have crashed and, not made it?
Yeah.
Or is that, oh, there's land ahead. So...
Or did we pass it?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We're going the wrong way. Oh, Chris. I don't know why I said India. I feel so embarrassed. So let's go ahead and recap. We spent a lot on this episode, and I think it's because it's something that is secretly plaguing everybody. I've never seen someone put on Instagram, hey guys, I just got back from comparing myself to others, and this is how I feel in this moment. But maybe, a lot of what we do in this show is about talking about the things that no one's talking about, but is all thinking it or feeling about. So let's look at these 4 steps. It's not how to compare yourself to others, but it's what to do once you've compared yourself to others so you can leave that situation or that experience or emotion feeling empowered and unstoppable. Step 1 is to, number 1, acknowledge it. Become like a detective to your comparisons. Every time you see yourself doing it, go, there I am. I'm doing it again. There it is. And just like list it out and identify that. Notice if you feel good or bad when you do it. Step number 2 is to create a real context of the comparison so you can really put it in perspective. And we gave you 3 examples. Those 3 being time, like their timeline, comparing if they've been in business for 10 years and you too go back to where they've been in business for 2 years. The goals that you have and the goals that they have, and that they might be very different. And of course, personality types. Everyone has the same amount of strengths and everyone has the same amount of weaknesses. In my theory, okay, this is my theory, right? That everyone has the same amount of strengths and everyone has the same amount of weaknesses. They're just not the same strengths and they're not the same weaknesses. So you might have a different strength than someone else and you may not have uncovered that. What's my strength? What's my strength? Well, go take the Myers-Briggs test in the show notes and you can begin to discover that for yourself. Step 3 is to be able to see if from the contrast of this, from this comparison, can you identify new things that you want to add to your bucket list, your vision board, your goal list? Because there's always something available there. There's a new desire born from that breakdown. And then step number 4, sharing gratitude or having gratitude or feeling gratitude for the things that you've already accomplished, the things you've already done, the things you already have, and most importantly, gratitude for this person that has popped into your life, whether it made you feel good or bad, but having that gratitude for them as well.
So the last thing that I'm going to say here is just to really make sure that you're being, kind of patient in this process, because once you start to identify it, you're going to notice, just call yourself out. Okay, that was 1 today. That was 2 today. And just start to acknowledge it and then move slowly through the steps. And I think that, gratitude is probably the best thing that you can maybe even start off with. Just
Absolutely.
Making sure you're grateful for all those things that we already talked about.
Yeah, we're not here to say you're wrong if you've compared yourself to someone, if you feel like crap when you do it, if you feel jealous. We're not trying to make anybody wrong, and you don't want to make yourself wrong for you. The goal isn't to beat yourself up for it, but just work through it.
Yeah,
because it's happening. You're already doing it, so you can't not do it when you're doing it.
So just use it. Right. Yeah, use it to your advantage. I feel like is a good way to, if you're going to compare yourself, you might as well do it the right way. I feel like that is a good summary of all the stuff that we talked about.
That's it for this episode. You guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Make sure to check out the show notes and leave any comments on the blog, and we'll see you in the next episode. Are you frustrated that no matter how hard you hustle, no matter how much you get done in a day, you still feel like you have little results to show for it? Do you feel like you're doing everything right, but there's still something missing? Well, what if there was an easier way? What if your business could be fun, effortless, and profitable? Phoebe and I have put together a free audio MP3 for you, compiling the 77 business affirmations for creating success from the inside out. And we want to give it to you absolutely free. This is your chance to rewire your brain for bigger results in your life and your business. To get instant access absolutely free, simply visit 77affirmations.com. That's the number 77affirmations.com.